Last weekend, we had our first ever youth ministry core team retreat, and I brought 16 youth and young adults to Whistler for a weekend. So we had 17 people in a 5-bedroom home in Whistler for one weekend. So thanks be to God, I brought some earplugs, so at least I was able to get some sleep. I don't know about the rest of the 12 and all those who came. A really interesting part of the retreat weekend was something called the Guardian Angel Challenge. So at the start of the retreat, everyone pulls a name out of a hat, and whoever's name you pull out of that hat, you're that person's guardian angel. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to do acts of charity for that person all weekend long without telling them that you're their guardian angel. So I pulled out Kwan's name from the hat, so I had to do acts of charity for Kwan all weekend long without telling him that I was his guardian angel. At the end of the retreat, everyone gets to guess who their guardian angel was to see if anyone knew, if anyone found out, and then everyone shares who they were actually the guardian angel for. Although only 3 out of 17 people guessed who their guardian angel was, we all agreed that that exercise, that challenge, the guardian angel challenge, was like a spiritual boost of charity for the whole weekend. And many people said they felt that everyone was so kind to them. They felt that everyone was so kind. And since the retreat ended, I kind of missed having this guardian angel challenge. And it got me thinking, what if the Guardian Angel Challenge wasn't just a weekend challenge for a youth event? What if it was a way of life? What if this Guardian Angel Challenge, being kind intentionally to other people, wasn't just something we tried out for a weekend for one person, me for Kwan? But what if that was my actual way of behaving to every person? Because that is what St. Paul says in today's second reading. St. Paul's opening words, be kind to one another. Now, often when we think of this word kindness, we might just equate it with being nice. But kindness is actually a fruit of the Holy Spirit. So kindness is a powerful way to actually love other people. My definition of kindness, I made it up this morning. You might have another idea, but kindness, I say, is an act of charity before a request is made. Kindness is an act of charity before a request is made. So to understand this, I'll contrast it versus obedience. So kindness is an act of charity before a request is made, and obedience is an act of charity after a request is made. Okay, here's a story to explain it. Okay, so Neil, one of our retreat leaders, said that he discovered who his guardian angel was on Saturday night. He was trying to fall asleep, and then all of a sudden this guy, Gabriel, came by and said, "Neil, you look really tired. Would you like a massage?" And Neil was like trying to fall asleep, and he was like mumbled like no or something. And then all of a sudden he felt, and he really felt it, Gabriel with a wooden massage stick rubbing the back of his calf. Okay, so is that an act of kindness or an act of obedience? It's an act of kindness. It's an act of charity, or at least his attempt, before a request is made. Whereas if Neil was just laying back and said, "Hey, guardian angel, my calf's feeling a little bit tight. Can you come over and give me a massage?" If Gabriel was to do that, that would have been an act of obedience, right? An act of charity after a request is made. And I at least found this story very funny, but it actually points into why kindness is actually really, really, really hard to do. To actually be aware of someone's need before they request it, and to actually do an act of charity for that person, that's really hard. And when you do it well, it's actually a really powerful form of love. And in today's second reading, St. Paul goes way further into what kindness looks like. And he talks about the relationship between husband and wife. An interesting thing I learned about this week, looking into kindness, Dr. John Gottman, he's a marriage expert. This is what he says. After 30 years of research on marriage, Dr. Gottman has a 94% certainty on which couples stay together based upon one factor: how kind they are to each other. A 94% certainty on which couples stay together in marriage based upon how kind they are to each other. He says that kindness is the number one predictor of happiness and stability in marriage. And when you look at what Dr. Gottman recommends, it's ultimately, his motto is, for kindness, small things often. So he says, don't wait until your spouse asks you to do something. You have to anticipate their needs on a daily basis and try to make it happen. So rather than look at, okay, I'm going to show love for my wife by waiting for the big anniversary or the big birthday party, and then I'll show some grand gesture of love. He says that is not going to work. He says what actually works are small things done often, anticipating the needs of your spouse. So he gives examples like the simple acts of holding your spouse's hand, sensing that they might need your presence or your touch, or just putting down your phone and listening when you sense that they want to vent or just share what's on their heart. A constant list of all of these acts of charity before requests are made. Because you know, if it's your birthday, you're probably going to expect something from your spouse. That's more of an act of obedience when you do something nice for your spouse on a big event. But the daily acts of kindness, acts of charity before any request is made, that's what he says is the number one predictor of happiness and stability in marriage. Now, I'm not here just to give marriage advice. I'm here as a priest to lead you to Jesus Christ. And so for Christians, we're called to take this idea of kindness way further, way further. That's why kindness is actually a powerful form of love. God is love. And kindness is one of the clearest ways we can imitate God. For Christians, we're called to do acts of kindness out of love for God. It should be mind-blowing for us to think about that we're actually called to do acts of kindness for others, acts of charity before requests are made out of love for God. That's why St. Paul talks about what husbands and wives are supposed to do to each other in today's second reading, like obedience, service, laying down your life for each other for the motive out of love for God. It would be impossible to live this life of service and obedience and love for each other unless you had some higher motive which was driving all of your behavior. And St. Paul says it has to be out of love for God. And Jesus takes it even further to say that your eternal destiny, whether you go to heaven or hell, ultimately, one of the essential parts of that is kindness. A real understanding of kindness. He says at the final judgment, he's going to say, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, you came to visit me." Every single one of these things are essentially acts of kindness, acts of charity done before a request is made. And they're all done ultimately for love of God. A great story about a saint who actually did acts of kindness constantly out of love for God is St. John of the Cross. He shares this story about how he was walking down the streets and he saw this beggar on the street who was really dirty and sick. And St. John of the Cross decided to perform an act of charity before a request is made. So he went to this beggar on the street and started washing his feet. He started cleaning this man's feet. And while he was washing this man's feet, all of a sudden he saw the wounds of the crucifixion on this man's feet. And without blinking an eye, he looked up at the beggar and he says, "So it is you, Lord." Imagine that. He is so clear about the acts of kindness he's performing out of love for God that he is able to see the wounds of the crucifixion on this man's feet. And without being shocked, he knows, "So it is you, Lord." So clear about his purpose of why he's doing it. And so for us, for Christians, we're called to do acts of kindness on a daily basis out of love for God. And when we actually do this, as we experienced it on the retreat weekend, when you actually perform acts of love in this way, it changes everything. We all experienced something on the retreat weekend in which we felt like we could actually be saints, that we could actually do something great in life. When every single one of us was trying to perform acts of charity for other people, when I had to think at least 10 times, I remember that weekend, like, oh yeah, I'm Kwan's guardian angel. I got to do something for him because I'm struggling to actually love him. It changes the whole dynamic of relationships with other people. And one of the powerful things about this guardian angel challenge is that when we receive such acts of kindness from other people, we just can't help but want to give it to other people. It's like kindness is an act that it multiplies. It just continues to multiply in the lives of other people. And one of the best things about God is that he always leads the way. Did you ever realize that the only reason anything exists, creation itself, is ultimately an act of kindness? It's an act of charity before any request was made. Creation itself and our ultimate existence is an act of kindness. And everything God does is ultimately an act of kindness for us. And he shows this perfectly in the Eucharist. We heard about this in today's gospel. Jesus knows how deeply we need to share in his life if we're going to live what he's called us to. Jesus knows how deeply we need to receive him in the Eucharist if we want to participate in eternal life. I don't know about you, but if I didn't have the Eucharist on a daily basis, I'd fall apart. Jesus knows how badly I need him. And so he pours his life out to me in the Eucharist every day because I deeply need him every single day. And so the Eucharist is ultimately an act of kindness too, an act of total generosity. And if we're open to this gift, if we're open to actually receive what Jesus wants to do for us in this Mass, it can transform our lives too. So I challenge everyone, myself included, this guardian angel challenge should not just be something the youth got to experience for one weekend, but it should be a daily way of life for each one of us. By intentionally trying to love other people before they ask for our love, we can actually transform the world. That's what Jesus did 2,000 years ago, and he wants to do it in each one of our lives today as well.